Hello and welcome everyone for joining this webinar organized by the Association of European Heating Industry. I'm your moderator today. My name is Peter Vis and I'm a senior advisor at Rudd Peterson Public Affairs in Brussels. The topic of the day is delivering carbon neutral heat. What role will hydrogen play? So basically, we're going to have a great discussion with a great panel, which consists of Federica Sabbati, who's the Secretary General of the Association of European Heating Industry. We've got member of the European Parliament, Bart, who's Dutch and a member of the Liberal Group, Renew, and he sits on the Industry, Research and Energy Committee of the European Parliament. Thank you for joining us, Bart. We have also Dr. Henrik Siegle, who's the Executive Vice President of Bosch Thermotechnology. We have Weinberger, who is the Senior Advisor for Advanced Industrial Technologies and the Hydrogen Coordinator in the European Commission's DG GROW. And we have Dr. Bertrand Schmitt, CEO of BDR THERMEA. So thank you, all of you, for being on the panel. To all of our audience, please do use the chat option, which is at the right of your screen, and I will be trying to pick up the questions. Please keep the questions short, because I have to read them while moderating. And anyway, we will start with interventions, 2-minute interventions by everybody, starting with you, Federica. So perhaps you can kick off. Is there a role for hydrogen as a heating fuel for buildings? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. We think there is a role for hydrogen in heating. I think there's three main reasons. The first one is the bigger one, which is to help decarbonize buildings. I think this is a big challenge and perhaps sometimes even overlooked in its size. But as you probably know, buildings represent the single largest source of CO2 emissions in the EU. It's half of the energy consumption. And it's very difficult to decarbonize them. It's very difficult to find one solution that fits for everything and for every building and for every climate in Europe. So we see that electricity will play a big role, of course, particularly with efficient systems like heat pumps. But here comes the role of green gases and hydrogen. Electricity can probably not do everything. We look at the various studies that are around, and both the scenarios of Commission, but even of the electricity sector, doesn't see more than about 40% electrification of buildings in 2050. So we need to look at what's happening with the rest of the buildings stock that we have, or the buildings that we will have. And this is where we think hydrogen and green gases can play a role as a decarbonization tool. And finally, I think the interesting thing about green gases and hydrogen is that we already have from the infrastructure side in Europe a large gas infrastructure that goes from transmission, distribution, but also all the appliances that are in Europeans in our homes. Instead of decommissioning all of this large infrastructure, we could adapt it to work with green gases and therefore supply that energy, decarbonized and green, that would complement then electricity. So cutting overall costs is also an important part of the game. I think the big question now is what can heating do with the how the heating industry can work. And I think that I have to pass on to you back again, Peter, for
the
follow-up.
Well, thank you, Federica. Bart, congratulations, by the way, for being appointed the European Parliament's rapporteur on the Network Services Director. You are also, though, a shadow rapporteur for the ITRA committee's opinion on the Commission's hydrogen strategy. So, what role does hydrogen have then in decarbonizing heating in buildings?
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's very interesting to be in such an innovative place as the heating industry. Well, in July, the European Commission launched its strategy on hydrogen. And now the European Parliament is drafting their own report on behalf of on negotiating that. Is that noise audible for everyone? Or is it doable?
There's an echo.
It's okay.
I'll keep on going, okay? Thank you. So in the political discussions that we have right now of drafting our own hydrogen report, there's maybe two camps. So let me just first introduce the first camp, school of thinking that I would identify. And they believe that it's idealistic. They believe that hydrogen should be produced solely by solar and wind, and hydrogen based on gas, even with carbon capture, is out of the question. The second thing they usually believe is that the production and use of hydrogen should be very local. They are against big infrastructural trans-European networks to be dealt with. So the third thing they think is that the use of hydrogen should be limited to industrial processes, and if really necessary, we might do some heavy-duty transport, but that's about it. Now, there's another school of thought, and that school of thought is my school of thought. It's more realistic, I think, and positivistic, which thinks that renewable hydrogen is, of course, the goal. We should go towards green renewable hydrogen from wind and solar, but that's the goal we're working for. But realistically, in a large scale, that's far from reality. And we need hydrogen based from natural gas with carbon capture to start ramping up the market and decarbonizing our industries first and other hard-to-abate sectors, but we shouldn't exclude everything. The second thing we believe is to ramp up this hydrogen market, we need infrastructure throughout the continent, right? Not just local. And that's important. The third thing we believe that hydrogen can be used in many different sectors then. And also and that is a thing that I'd like to stress here, that idealists say that, well, we should electrify everything. Well, if hydrogen is a cheap and good alternative, why would we stop this innovation? I don't see any reason why we should stop it. So that's the main thing that we're working towards in the European Parliament. And I hope that will help your industries, innovative as you are, being even better in what you do. So I wish you the best of luck in that.
Thank you very much, Bart. There is a bit of an echo, so if everybody who isn't speaking could mute their mics, I think the quality of the sound might be better. So thank you very much. Now, Henrik, I'm going to go to you next. What can Bosch offer by way of hydrogen solutions, and why hydrogen?
Well, next to the electrical path, of course, hydrogen offers a great potential to decarbonize the heating in the building sector, as Federica was also mentioning earlier. And the good thing is, of course, that we as industry, not only Bosch, but the European heating industry, do have already for both paths, the electrical as well as the gas path, the necessary technology in our portfolio. But focusing now only on hydrogen for heating, you need to know that our gas heating appliances today can already cope with 20% hydrogen. So by blending 20% of hydrogen into our gas grid, we can already today contribute immediately to the CO2 reduction. And what we are currently developing are appliances which can run with 100% hydrogen. And what I like especially is the concept of a hydrogen-ready boiler, because these are affordable and future-proof appliances, because they can run first on natural gas and being then later switched by an installer, by a service technician in the field, easily in a few steps to 100% hydrogen operation once there is sufficient hydrogen in our gas grid. And we are running currently several field trials, demonstration projects, and we are preparing mass production. So concluding your question, hydrogen offers great potential to decarbonize our building sector. The industry can contribute, is ready to contribute to our European climate targets.
Great. Well, thank you. And Christian, perhaps a introductory word from the European Commission? With your mic on, of course. Your mic is not on. No. Okay, we'll move on to Bertrand. Perhaps you'd like to intervene and say what your company, BDR THERMEA, is doing with hydrogen boilers?
Yes, I think I will keep it short and just share with you what statements we as an industry and also as a company we have. The first one, and that's more a summary of what you've heard before, is like there is no silver bullet that will decarbonize the industry within a year or 5 or 10. There's a lot of options we have to choose, and we have to choose the right one. There are more than 100 million houses today in Europe that are running with old technologies, and we have a lot of technology that can improve that. The second one is we also think that we cannot wait until everything is perfect. If that had been for electric cars, that would have been stopped 10 or 15 years ago. So you see how that goes. We need to have a long-term perspective. So, and work with things that work and do things. The third one is an important one because what might be not everybody is aware that the technology of combustion and technology of hydrogen combustion is truly European. So we built on a European strength that is available today, where we have R&D capabilities and production capabilities in the European Union. And last but not least, there is one thing I'm also convinced, and that we as a company are convinced of, that nobody can do this alone. We can develop a lot of great stuff inside our company, but if we don't consider the whole value chain and influence, and in meetings like this today, this will just not take off. So it's really a thing that we have to collaborate strongly in the future to make sure that these solutions hit the market and help us make sure that we keep our houses warm and keep the climate cool.
Yeah, thank you, Bertrand. I think indeed we're going to collaborate. We're going to talk more about that later. So thank you for the introductory words. Christian, can you, is your microphone on? I can't hear you. No. Sorry. Okay, we'll have to try and fix that problem with Christian. It's a pity about that. But look, we'll move into the debate. I was thinking of having sort of 3 topics of discussion. The first is about the appliances as such, what's available. The second cluster is about the fuels used in the appliances and, of course, the necessary infrastructure for getting that fuel to homes and buildings. And the third is the policy solutions that are needed to help decarbonize heating. That's the bit, I'm afraid, Bart, we're going to come more to the European people, the European institutions, as to the sort of policy solutions that you might be thinking of, but we'd be very keen to hear as well what industry thinks we should be doing. So, Henrik, on the first cluster about heating appliances available, have you got, you've said you've got hydrogen appliances ready now, is that right? Who should be buying these?
Also, first of all, our appliances, as I just mentioned, today can cope with 20%. We are developing the appliances with 100% hydrogen operation, currently field trials, and then, of course, preparing mass production. And who should they buy? Of course, it is a solution, actually, an affordable one, especially, of course, for the retrofit case. I have one behind me. It looks like the boiler which we have today, so it fits in form and size in the footprint to today's installation. Because of that, of course, you do not need so much of change in the infrastructure, especially a solution, of course, for existing buildings, matching size and footprints, and also the flow temperatures. So in reality, an immediate solution today. By having then hydrogen in the gas grid, we can contribute immediately to the savings. And when it comes then to hydrogen-ready boilers, of course, as I just described, you can install them today, have savings today in terms of CO2 savings, and later convert them when we have then 100% hydrogen in the infrastructure. And we are currently in the phase to prepare mass production exactly for these hydrogen-ready boilers. But that is only one technology, of course. Yeah, one has to look in. We can even, of course, have gas boilers today where you are then using renewable gases with 100%. But I don't want to make it too complicated. We want it only now on hydrogen boilers.
And the costs are manageable are they if we were to buy one of these?
Exactly. And the topic is, of course, we have to develop some parts new. Hydrogen has a different characteristics in terms of combustion, natural gas. So the combustion part has to be developed new. Also the supervision of the flame. And initially it will be, of course, when it comes then to lower quantities in the beginning, a little bit of an extra cost. But in the long run, should be on the same level, the product cost as today. And that's why this, of course, is a super advantage of these boilers, a quite affordable solution, because today's boilers are a very cost-efficient solution.
Yeah, great. And Bertrand, I'm going to come to you next. Can these hydrogen-ready technologies be deployed in all types of buildings? Or is it more suited to some than others? Are they pretty polyvalent in the French? Do they work everywhere?
But I think what you have to be aware, one is the production of these products, and the second is the installation and the servicing of these products. And what you can do when you move from, let's say, today using methane to going to hydrogen, the whole value chain, it's almost 500,000 of people who are working, 500,000 companies that are working, installing, servicing these products in the market. They can just switch to this new technology. So if we talk about going fast, the service is available in the market today. So that's the strength of the whole thing. When you talk about buildings, we believe that if you have the right device, you can, on renovation, on replacement, it's a perfect solution because you have everything installed and you have the service technicians there. On new build, you might want to consider also other technologies. Again, there's not one silver bullet, but hydrogen boilers can definitely heat residential buildings, commercial buildings, and others.
And do they perform as well in terms of heat provision? In the depths of winter, for example, it's snowing as I speak, it might get even colder. Is it going to be as good in all respects?
Well, we have trials running for the last 2 years now in countries like the Netherlands, which is maybe not the coldest in the world. We are putting trials now in Germany, in the UK, and Henrik, and we are in the same. It's starting now. In our experience, they work very, very well. There is no problem whatsoever. It's another energy density that you have in hydrogen compared to methane, but that's nothing you cannot manage with good engineering.
Yeah. Okay. So, and Bart, how to start decarbonising buildings? I suppose there's a hierarchy of measures one can take, but you can do it through fuels, and I suppose we can do it through energy efficiency and insulating homes. And which fuels? Is hydrogen one of the options?
I think it is, Peter. And the reason I think it is that we are in a phase right now of ramping up a market, and we need to create both supply and demand. And we think we have to exclude any good ideas to create that demand or that supply. And of course, let's be honest, like the heavy industry and also heavy transport, they need it first. They are hard to abate. They have no alternatives. And where you have an alternative, you might think of that first, because renewable energy is also a scarcity. Why use hydrogen for all sorts of industry which have an alternative? That's, of course, the question. But I think that if you would produce it locally, but also on large scales between industry clusters, and transport it throughout Europe, there is going to be a market, abundances, shortages, there's going to be trade. And I think that some of the villages that might want to experiment with hydrogen, why not? We have near industry clusters, for example. Others, and those might be villages who are eligible to try and to be on the forefront of stimulating it. But I also think that new ways to produce hydrogen, not just by electrolysis, but also by, for example, windmills who instantaneously produce hydrogen, which might create very cheap forms of hydrogen, is interesting for some of the villages to experiment on. And I think we'll be seeing many of these new innovative forms to create an industry which will shape Europe in its hydrogen-based economy. It will be the backbone of our industry, sure, but it can deliver here and there, not the entire industry in Europe and the entire population of Europe, but it might be beneficial for some parts in Europe to actually deliver heating there as well.
Yeah. So basically, that's a
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, Christian,
Oh,
we can't hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah. Would you like to say something now?
Maybe, yes, I would just add a bit of a perspective, in particular from the point of view of the Commission's idea about the hydrogen strategy, and maybe later on also about the Clean Hydrogen Alliance. I think one important element to understand is that the exclusive, or the sort of the predominant, the reason, the sine qua non for the Commission hydrogen strategy is the Green Deal. So without the Green Deal, there's no hydrogen strategy. The hydrogen strategy has to serve the Green Deal and has to contribute to reduce the CO2 emissions in Europe. That's the rationale, the whole rationale behind.
Understood.
And at the same point, of course, then everybody who can use hydrogen to achieve that objective should be admitted. There's no reason to exclude anybody, no reason whatsoever. The only prerequisite there is that it has to, at some point, become economically viable. So you have to have a path to economic viability. Otherwise, there's no sense and there's no justification to waste public money on something that will never become economically viable. So that's a very important reason. And you can also ask the question, why wasn't hydrogen discovered earlier? Or why did it take until 2021 or July 2020 for hydrogen to make this big jump in the public attention? And the big problem is a hen and egg problem in terms of the ways to get the cost down. At the moment, if you can buy green hydrogen, no problem, but it's just so much more expensive that nobody wants to buy it. And you could produce, if you produce a lot of hydrogen, not in terms of kilograms, but in terms of thousands of tons, then the price would go down. And that would become economically interesting. But at the same time, it needs a big investment. And who is going to invest 2 billion euros in a hydrogen manufacturing factory if he doesn't have customers to take it? So this is the hen and egg problem that we are trying to overcome. This is the rationale behind the strategy. This is why the Commission says we want to achieve this goal of have the first 1 million tons of installed production capacity by 2024, because we need to make this scale up in order to get the costs down to make things viable. Maybe one last comment when it comes to sort of the discussion about trucks or buses or industry or heating. I think there is quite straightforward again, the thing to be used. It's the issue of when does a particular application become commercially viable. And from that point of view, of course, the first application is road traffic, because in road transport, already with €5 per kilogram, you can have a good case to get companies buy hydrogen trucks. If you talk about industry, steel plants or refineries or chemical plants, that bar goes down a lot to 150. So if you cannot achieve the 150, there will be nobody buying that hydrogen. So there will be no application for this hydrogen. And yes, you have today already gray hydrogen at 150, but that doesn't contribute to the climate reduction, at least not sufficiently. So that's why you really need to get green hydrogen to this level in order to be interesting for the chemical industry, for industry in general.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge for hydrogen in terms of price level is heat. When you want to produce heat, you have alternatives today that are equivalent to something like 90 cents. So when you have something else, some other alternative option to produce heat at 90 cents, why would you spend €5 for hydrogen? Nobody would. So that's, I think, a bit the discussion, the hen and egg discussion in terms of the heating industry, that you really need to get even lower in terms of the cost level of the green hydrogen in order to make it attractive for heating. That said, there's no reason why that shouldn't happen. It's just an explanation why some people who try to prioritize, I don't. I say it's everything that reduces CO2 emissions is good, But that's why some people say maybe residential heating is not the first sector to address. And from a commercial point of view, this is certainly the case. But there's only so many lorries that will need hydrogen and pay €5 for that. So there will, at some point, when there's enough hydrogen and cheap hydrogen, it will be attractive for many more sectors.
And as Bart said, it's a question of trying to ramp up demand and ramp up supply. Both of them have to be there. Now, I want to dwell a bit on the fuels, if that's okay, because we've already started, in effect, when you were discussing the relative costs of different types of hydrogen. I mean, we're all doing this, as you said, Christian, to decarbonize. It's part of the Green Deal, and ideally, of course, at an affordable cost. So what about this idea of putting a bit of hydrogen into the methane distribution system as is today? Assuming this is clean hydrogen, isn't that going to be a great thing to do? Perhaps Henrik and Bertrand, I would put the question to you, Henrik, first. Can you were talking about 20% mix of hydrogen in the grid today. Is this something that could be deployed gradually in the coming 2, 3, 4 years?
Yeah.
That close to being able to do this?
Yeah, the heating appliances today in the field, also older appliances, can deal with 10% safely. Our current product portfolio in the heating industry can cope with 20% as set in a very reliable and safe way. So in terms of having then additional demand also out of the heating sector, yeah, to come then to this economy of scale, similar like PV in the past, to come down then in the cost of hydrogen. For sure, this is of course a way forward. And then we see different transitions. You can have either a blending all over the gas grid, or you can have then hydrogen islands, yeah, where you have in a hydrogen island 100% hydrogen operation. Or, and I think that is an extremely smart one, is I start with hydrogen ready boilers. They can also be driven with this blended 20% mixture.
Yeah.
And then later, once we have then sufficient renewable hydrogen in our gas infrastructure, can then be easily switched. And by that, we do also avoid this lock-in effect, because appliances which we are now producing, which we are now selling, which we are now then having in the field installed, will of course live some years in the field. And that's why it is also, and as Bertrand was also mentioning, yeah, we better start now to be then future-proof, and then of course also contribute now already to the climate target.
Well, just to pick up a question that's been put into the chat, an observation in that respect is that if we were to go through this sort of increasing share of hydrogen as a mix up to 20% and beyond perhaps, and then one day we switch entirely to hydrogen, then clearly everybody has to be ready together. Everyone would have to have changed their boiler before the hydrogen only scenario could be deployed.
Yeah, and that is what I said as the different transition periods. First, this blending thing that works, of course, and then you can city per city in islands, of course, say, okay, now I want to convert the appliances. Something what we also see, for example, in Germany, when we have then different today natural gas quality changes, there you are also changing then one street after the other. In a similar way, we can do this then also with hydrogen. And one has, of course, also to see, and Bertrand was mentioning it, one needs to see the replacement rate which we have today. We are talking about many million boilers, of course, which we need to convert, and having then something which is future ready, step by step introduced, then you make also the switch later easier than, for example, when it comes then to one island after the other.
Yeah, indeed. And basically the hydrogen, if you were blending it, it doesn't present any logistical problems, does it? In terms of transmission grid operation, perhaps Bertrand, do you have a word on that? I've heard the molecules are a bit different or something. These are, you know, apart from, yeah. I'm afraid your microphone's off, Bertrand.
Yeah, we have hydrogen has a bit lower energy density than methane, but that's just it's a technical parameter that you set and then you manage it. So that's nothing you cannot do. Yeah, there was one thing about pricing. If today, if you say that on road traffic, the pricing, let's say the hurdle to go to hydrogen is different, maybe it's also good to question why that is, because it's all stuff that is using energy and producing CO2. So when you look at energy prices, we know that there is a lot of influence taken by tax. That definitely could also be influenced. I'm not saying we have to increase taxes on the gas that is distributed to the people for heating, because that's probably then a social problem. But we have to say, okay, why is this difference? It's not a natural difference that we have. It's more like the history that we're carrying with us. But coming back to if we really want to have a big effect here, and talking about the renovation rate that we have today, the heating market today, if you take the heating market, is 100, and then 10 to 20% of this is only new build. So we have to tackle the renovation and the replacement very much. Otherwise, the effect on the decarbonization will be very low. So going there with hydrogen-ready boilers, going there with boilers that can work with a blend up to 20% is already a big step. And then it's up to the people who have to say, we bring in hydrogen to make sure that this happens. But we can create a precondition for that. Technology is there. We can just install. And again, it's full European.
Yep. We're going to talk about the policy steps in the last part. Bart, if I can come to you. There seems to be a tension between getting the costs of hydrogen down by scale, through scale, and the wish for this to be clean hydrogen from renewable sources. There's a bit of a paradox. It's a bit like promoting electric cars 10 years ago, when the energy mix was very much, you know, carbon intensive electricity, let's be honest. But, you know, because the cars are there, the demand, basically those cars are still perhaps running today on a cleaner mix, and perhaps in the future, an even cleaner mix. Can we look at that sort of progression, do you think, in gas?
I think we must look at progression. We never thought that solar and wind would have such a steep decrease in price. It's a revolutionary. I mean, even our prime minister said that windmills don't go around on wind, but on subsidies 6 years ago, and now he's proven wrong, right? And he's from my party, so I'm very nice. But really, the market has proven us wrong. And that's the greatest incentive for hydrogen as well, the green revolutionary production of electricity, of course. But we shouldn't exclude the use of gas to produce hydrogen on a large scale. You cannot use every scarce amount of electricity that you would produce green for your society and use it up all on hydrogen. That's just not a feasible way to do it. And you should also think of carbon capture and carbon usage. And that way you could actually produce climate neutral, low carbon hydrogen on a large scale. And like Christian said, the scale is of utmost importance if you want to be competitive with other alternatives. And again, especially for your industry, the price of hydrogen, clean hydrogen, is of utmost importance whether your innovations will be market feasible, right? So yeah, of course, production by gas is a no-brainer for anyone who wants to ramp up the market. But like I said in my introduction with the very bad sound, and I've switched to another computer, and I hope the audience would appreciate it. There's a difference between some of the, let's say, idealistic views of people who want the perfect solution for everything, which is becoming the enemy of the good. And the good solution is ramping it up on every benefit from it. So I hope that will be the reality in Europe in a couple of years. But it's a very ambitious agenda that the Commission has put down. We're supporting it, but I mean, we have to do everything that we can in order to enforce the hydrogen economy and the backbone to be there.
Yeah, I must say, Christian, I don't want to put you on the spot, but my sense is the Commission is not doing enough on CCS. And this is going to hold us back in the hydrogen world, because the hydrogen made from natural gas, where the CO2 is basically sequestered, this is what they call blue hydrogen. How much of it is there going to be?
I would say the Commission is very open to all the routes. And as I said before, the important factor will be the commercial viability. So in the end, the best solution, and that's actually also contained in the hydrogen strategy, would be to make an auction for contracts for difference. To say, okay, we want hydrogen with 90% reduction of CO2 emissions. We want capacity of, I don't know, 3 gigawatt. What contribution do you need from the public sources in order to make the project viable? And then you can see, then you can really judge what is the price of blue and what is the price of green. At the moment, it's all speculation, it's all simulation, we don't know. So we would have to get to that point in order to really take some decisions. And I think the Commission is open, there's no question. The key is CO2 emission reduction. But there's many ways to do it. There's innovative ways, I would agree with Bart as well, that there's innovative ways that we don't even maybe know about today. And there may be other sources that might achieve the same level of reduction, but that would be even less costly. So this is, of course, something very important also to have in mind. But the point is, it's a bit difficult to speculate, and it's even more difficult to speculate for the Commission. So I think we are not the ones who will speculate, is it cheaper to go green or cheaper to go blue? I think that in any case, CCS is not just for green hydrogen or for blue hydrogen in that case, but also for other application industry. So that will go its path anyway. But in particular, in terms of hydrogen, clean hydrogen being made available, this is something that very much depends on also progress by industry and cost, not just projections, not academic discussions about costs, but real industrial costs of how to make this happen. And in that sense, also, of course, it is true. I have to agree with that this road transport bonus is, of course, due to the fact that there is the mineral oil taxation, which is in a way this sort of people talk about the internalization of external costs. So you already account for the additional cost that society has and put that in the price through a tax. And that's why there it becomes viable more quickly. Yep. And that's why for airplanes it's more difficult, because kerosene doesn't have this mineral tax.
But I'm going to talk about taxes later.
Okay, fine. I'll spare the rest of my...
Tell me now, tell us all, please, about this Clean Hydrogen Alliance, because I know we've got 2 company members of that alliance. So please, you explain what the Commission's vision is.
Well, the point is, it was announced on the same day, and this is no coincidence, because the Commission said, okay, we want to be concrete. That's why you have the concrete targets. It also said we need industry to make progress there. It's not enough that we pass laws and wait what happens. We need to really also forge alliances, in particular to overcome this chicken and hen and egg problem. So this supply-demand deadlock. And for this, we need really to have a concerted action by industry, by the producers, and by the users. So here we have users at the table, but of course also the producers need to go there and speak in a low voice, convincing voice. Okay, if you all want hydrogen, we can agree on this price and we'll produce it for that price. That is, if I can produce it in a very short form, the purpose of the alliance, to get everybody on the table to agree on the way forward. I think furthermore, of course, the question is also we need some innovative solutions. So, for example, when I was listening to your presentation that you make now, hydrogen-ready boilers, well, that's a very good idea, and I think that's a good way forward. But I think what we see also when we talk a bit more intensely, and that's the purpose of this alliance, to talk a bit more intensely, because between different types of companies, we see that you have to take a comprehensive look if you really want to get hydrogen economically viable. And therefore, I could, for example, imagine that your boiler, your Bosch boiler, not only is able to burn the hydrogen that comes from the grid, but lots of houses have already solar panels on the roof. And these solar panels produce electricity or heat when it's not, or too much at some times of the year and too little at other times of the year. So why not upscale your boiler to take this electricity or heat and convert it into hydrogen to store it, to have sort of a seasonal storage. I'm not saying that this is something that will happen overnight, but we need comprehensive solutions, and this is the background of the roundtables. Now, we have, Peter, just to give you a bit more comprehensive look, we have these 6 roundtables, so we have 6 separate pillars, which each of them has its own discussion place. We have the hydrogen production, clean hydrogen production, we have the transmission, and then we have the 4 application sectors, one of which is mobility, one of which is industry, one of which is the energy sector as such, and one of which is actually residential applications. So that's where also, in fact, if you look up our website, you can see that Mr. Denner, the big boss of Henrik, is a co-chair of the round table, and we have only industrial sort of chairs. There's 3 co-chairs for each of the round tables, because we want industry to drive this discussion. We want industry to tell us what are the solutions that they could think of in order to get hydrogen going. And all those sort of 6 round tables times 3 co-chairs are the ones that have to go forward with the solutions, and then we can start to think about using public money to get this going.
Okay, thanks. Very quickly then, Henrik, what would you like to say that you're going to this alliance with?
No, I just wanted to add, or building on what you just said, in terms of innovation, of course, which we do not yet know. And one fair one is really also to have decentralized electrolyzers out there, having the PV on the different roofs, and then, of course, also having in a decentral way then hydrogen production. But you mentioned there one important point is wherever I do have then the production of this green hydrogen, I can use the existing gas grid for storage. And that storage is important when it comes then to renewables, because renewable energy is, of course, always intermittent. And that is one important advantage, I think, overall for hydrogen. And then, because we were focusing today on hydrogen for heating directly, of course, we are also talking in this round table then that we have then for decentral energy management also fuel cells out there, which can then, of course, also convert out of hydrogen, then again, electricity for decentral energy management. But to make it not too complicated, today only now in inverted commas only for hydrogen for heating. But again, this topic in terms of storage, using the existing infrastructure for storage, that is a very important one.
Bertrand, would you like to say anything about your hopes for this alliance very quickly? Your company, I understand, is part of it. And then we will move on to policy incentives or instruments. Bertrand.
Well, I think it's, if we look to 2030, 2050, I think we all see that there could be incredible solutions that really help us decarbonize everything. And as I said in the beginning, it's about how do you make the first steps. And if you wait until everything's perfect, if electric cars had waited until everything was green and everything was available, they would never have taken off. So, and I think we are at the same moment today. So it's important that from all the people who can influence building that infrastructure, these capacities to, and then us as an industry to create solutions. That's an important moment of time we are in now, and that's why we participate in this initiative. And if there are other initiatives coming up, we are definitely ready to go there too.
That's great. I like this mood of optimism and hope. And I must say that I worked in the commissions about 15 years ago on renewables, where they were at the time a very small share of the final energy mix. And yet now we've made great progress since, and the costs have done amazingly, been reduced amazingly in the meantime. So moving on to policy solutions, we've got 15 minutes left. But is the Parliament going to make policy recommendations to the Commission? Are we going to perhaps hear that the Parliament wants more targets or prioritize a particular type of hydrogen? Give us a steer, if you could, if you're allowed to.
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you to the Commission, because they actually produced a quite well and balanced strategy, we all assess. The debates in Parliament are always somewhat unpredictable. You never know what amendments on the last moment might be drawn in, but I think there's a quite broad common position that we all agree it should be done in phases, right? There should be scale, there should be certainty for businesses, there should be decisions made on an early stage of the process, because we have about 30 years to do it, right? But we need business certainty so that people would actually invest in it, and then ramping up the market is what we agree with the Commission is we should do, and then certain points arise politically. Should we blend or not? So those things might arouse in amendments, and I can't really predict how that will end up, but. As for now, I would say that there's support for that. There's also a question of standardization. There's a question of certification, which needs to be dealt with. There's a huge amount of legislation coming through Parliament in the next couple of in this legal term. It's all connected to hydrogen. It's all somewhat outdated. If you would look at the RED II directive, for example, and you would actually adapt that to hydrogen, you would say this is not the way that we want our legislation to be applied to hydrogen, because it's all just a bit different, as you understand. We need traceability, we need tradability, we need international cooperation. There's so many policy aspects coming in, and I think that Parliament will actually push for the biggest ambition that you could ask for, and the Commission has already done so. But the ambition to go really fast and to ramp it up as fast as we can, that's something that we will push for, because this is not an option that we have. There are alternatives, but this is definitely part of the new energy mix in Europe, and there's no time to waste. I think that will be the main signal that we want to give to the Commission. But again, the vote will only be in March, Peter. We have to wait, and the negotiations are still ongoing.
Yes. This story will never end. I mean, this is going to go forward in so many different installments, but still, the Parliament has the ball at the moment. So, everyone will be waiting to see what the Parliament gives by way of feedback. In the chat, we're getting lots of questions about cost. It keeps coming back to costs, and of course, that's related to scale. But I put it aside and just ask Henrik, perhaps, what do you think are the roadblocks to expanding the role of hydrogen? And policy-wise, what would you change?
Also we heard already some of the barriers. I would see there are three major actions. Also first of all, we have a lack of targets to produce, obviously, hydrogen, then to distribute hydrogen, and then of course also to use this now in our term here in the building sector. That is the first topic, first barrier to be addressed. And then we have heard it also lack of promotion through regulation. We could put it into the eco design and in the energy labeling, making it also then visible. And then of course we need to we have a lack of support measures to replace old heating appliances which are out there by new ones which are, for example, then hydrogen ready. And I think these three barriers, if we are addressing them, this would be, of course, fantastic actually to boost then towards getting the climate targets done. Yeah.
And Bertrand, I'm sure you would agree that funding is always going to be helpful from the European Union, but what else do you need in policy terms, would you say, Bertrand? Would you like to see taxation changes? Or just to put a particular policy on the table, is the inclusion of the building sector into the emissions trading system going to, it might happen in June. And do you think that would be helpful or not? I'm sorry if you're not an expert on the emissions trading system.
I'm definitely not. And the only.
But it's got a price on carbon.
I'm a bit prudent to tell that we have to change something on taxes, because that's definitely not my special field. What I just know is that when it comes to energy, taxes play a major role. I remember having discussions with people from McKinsey in the Netherlands who told me that if we just take everything that is running into the energy sector and see how this is allocated, probably that would be enough to just reallocate it to the right direction. So it's really about, is there a clear policy on where we want to be? If it's and I think hydrogen should play a major role into that. So that would be more a generic statement. Huh?
Yeah. So
and maybe one thing again, I think we as an industry, but not only as manufacturers, but also the whole value chain, until these devices are changed in the market, that's a very efficient thing that is working today. And if you feed this incredible machine with the right technologies, with the right supply of hydrogen, this can produce a lot of change in the market. And if we want to decarbonize, we have to use what we have. We have to build on what we have in Europe, and that's very strong.
Great, thank you. I'm going to come to Christian and then back to Bart. Christian, hydrogen is a fuel made in Europe, or it could be. It could be made in Europe. I mean, if we take Russian natural gas and then vent the CO2, make hydrogen, that's perhaps not going to help the Made in Europe logo, but other things, we could do this, we could produce our own fuels, liquid fuels even, through synthetic fuels and such like. So is this for you important in the Commission's mind, that it can be, this is an agenda that can be developed within Europe, the whole chain of supply, if you like?
You know, there was a mention also of the international dimension. We believe that we are in Europe possible, maybe even for the first time in history, to become energy autonomous, because we can produce all the hydrogen we need in Europe, no question. In the North Sea, in the Iberian Peninsula, wherever you have good conditions to produce renewables, you will get excellent conditions for cost-efficient hydrogen. So in that way, there's even an idea, and it's part of the strategy, by the way, to have green hydrogen traded in euros and not in dollars. So we have definitely a big ambition as the EU in terms of hydrogen. Yeah. I just to reply a bit to the question about the regulation. I mean, if you look at the recent, it was just before Christmas, modification of 10E, what you see there is hydrogen all over the place, electrolyzers, and the gas itself being pushed aside to almost a footnote. So the Commission it announced a lot with the strategy, and you can say, yes, this was just nice words, but it also announced that it will come into action, and it will certainly throughout the year now in 2021 make a lot of modifications, because Bart is right. Yes, indeed, RED II is not very supportive of hydrogen. So RED II will be revised, and let's see what the Commission will propose to the Parliament in terms of the new RED II regulation that should support hydrogen much better. And there's other areas, there's the alternate fuels directives and other directives that will need to modify in order to make hydrogen sort of to even the path for hydrogen from a regulatory point of view. And then you'll still need, of course, to cover the extra cost. It's very clear to everybody that we will not get to this commercially viable green hydrogen without a lot of support from public money. And that money is there. We should not rely on research. Of course, research is important, but here we're talking about rollout. And for rollout, you need to have massive investments, and that has massive costs. And we do have at this moment, actually, COVID has many disadvantages, but this is an advantage. We do have a new investment agenda. We have the European Recovery Fund, and there you have very prominently both renovation, housing renovation is there as an important element to invest, and you have hydrogen and you have energy. So in fact, 4 out of the 7 blocks of the new recovery funding is related to hydrogen, is beneficial for hydrogen, and 750 billion euros to finance the gap. That's a lot. You can really do a lot with that. So I think it's all there. I think you make it happen.
Thank you, Christian. Bart, we've had a few suggestions made there, such as targets standards, labels. You're a liberal. Is that music to your ears or not? More targets?
The best suggestion that I've heard so far is to trade in green hydrogen in euros. I hadn't really thought of that, but that's very innovative, and I like the sounding of that. The second thing I'd like to respond to is becoming really energy autonomous is interesting, but I do think, like Christian's previously said, it's all about cost, isn't it? And there are places on this earth where it's much, much cheaper to produce hydrogen than in Europe, sub-Saharan Africa. You might think of other places. I mean, it's Saudi Arabia's, yeah, I know, but we are trying. And import through harbors with a network connected to the industry clusters is also a very viable and logical option to go for. I think the harbors like Rotterdam are very well positioned to import hydrogen on a large scale into Europe. We don't have to produce everything ourselves. And it is connecting already to the world. It's already $100 billion €100 billion market at this time. There's a growth in hydrogen already at 6 to 8% a year. And what we need to do is decarbonize it. And it doesn't really matter to me whether we do that inside Europe or outside. The French would like to have everything autonomously inside Europe. But there's also a thing called efficiency scale outside Europe, where it's cheaper. And it would also benefit the innovations inside the heating industry, for example.
Yeah, that's a good point, that, decarbonized hydrogen doesn't have to be made in Europe. The main thing is that it is decarbonized, and we need to be sure that the molecules coming in are clean hydrogen molecules. So we're drawing to the end of our time.
I didn't suggest that. I just said we would be able to do this. But also don't overestimate the efficiency of the Sahara. Spain is almost as good as the Sahara. The difference between Rotterdam and the south of Spain, compared to the difference between south of Spain and Sahara, it becomes a matter of transportation, additional transportation cost from the Sahara. So it's not so obvious. But we should definitely support also North Africa in something that makes them producing more value in their local economy. So that is, there's many elements to account.
Well, thank you. I mean, this debate about hydrogen could go on. It's a very complex subject. But Federica, would you like to say any closing remarks? Thank you for having initiated this webinar. Interesting discussion, loads of chatting, by the way, on the sidebar, a lot of it between the different participants. But Federica, to wrap up, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the conversation. Very interesting also from our side. I think one thing that was not stressed a lot, but I think it's really important, is what are the alternatives to decarbonize buildings specifically. So we talked about production and making it commercially viable, hydrogen and so on. I think, we produce as industry, one of the technologies that we think is going to be one of the key technologies for decarbonization of buildings, that's heat pumps, electric heat pumps. And we know and we wanted this to be rolled out much more than it is today. And we think this is really going to have a great future. But it's not going to be the only one. And this is why we are looking at the green gases and hydrogen to find solution for the other half of the pie. And that's a pretty big half. So I think it's not just a matter of where, what is commercially viable, but it's making it commercially viable fast enough to be able to decarbonize, that big part of European buildings, which otherwise we don't have solutions for. And I think, as, engineering industry, we really start from that point of view. What's the technical solution that would, tick all those boxes, provide comfort to our users, our consumers, do it in a environmentally, sound way, be future-proof. And that's one thing. And it's certainly the big challenge, I think. But there's also, from what I gather, certainly big opportunities. And I think green gases and hydrogen clearly for us are one of them. We need to ensure that part of buildings is decarbonized, but we also have the opportunity that there are technologies that are ready already. And I have personally a very good, big hopes for the Hydrogen Alliance as the meeting place for that actually to be rolled out, for those matchmaking to happen, so that we can actually show that this actually works in the field, that it's real, and that is an option that makes sense from economically, environmentally, and a social, also economically viable way. So I think, to be continued.
Thanks. Yes, indeed.
For the input today.
Well, thank you very much, Federica, and thank you to the EHI for hosting this webinar. Thank you to all the panelists, to Bart, to Christian, to Bertrand, and to Henrik for joining us. And thank you to everybody who's been watching. We started 2 minutes late and we're finishing, we're finishing 2 minutes late. So we've been on the hour. But thank you very much indeed. Have a great afternoon and please stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.